Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Hawkins, and this is season 2, and we're doing something different this season, as you all know. We are going to be talking about Pro-Life 101. So we have a series of episodes coming out that's going to we're starting from the very beginning of what is abortion, human development, how the preborn child develops, what our laws and statistics are right now on abortion, and then we're going to get even further, talking about how abortion harms women, the history of the pro-life movement, the history of the pro-abortion movement, and then we're going to finally end the season talking about how you can get involved right now in ending abortion on your campus, in your community, in your church, in your parish. So today we have a very special guest. My good friend Georgette Forney is joining me. She is the co-founder of Silent No More Awareness Campaign, and we are going to be talking about how abortion harms women. Thanks, Georgette, for joining me.
Great to be with you and your listeners and your viewers.
Yes, we just informed Georgette that we are videotaping because we like to make sure you all have access to the podcast, whether it's YouTube or whether you do this on Stitcher, on iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. So sorry, Georgette, but you look wonderful.
Thanks.
So today I wanted to go through how abortion harms women, because when we talk about abortion a lot on college campuses, if I'm I've got some protesters who come up to me, and often they'll pick apart, and I'll see them typing, furiously on their laptop while I'm speaking, anytime I mention any side effect, negative side effect to abortion. And then they'll kind of march up to the microphone and say, that's wrong. Either they'll use a personal antidote of, I had an abortion, I've never regretted my abortion, I don't have any mental health problems. Or they'll kind of go back to one of the the turnaway study that UCSF published last year, saying that the vast majority of women don't regret their abortions, and there were major flaws of that study. And so it gets into this, I think, he said, she said type of thing, where then you're arguing about different statistical studies and analysis, and how long did they actually follow the patients, after the abortion versus, did they just do it in the first 6 months, or was it, the turnaway study? The women got to self-report. So only certain women would actually, complete the study. But what I love about what you do at Silent No More is you all are collecting the stories of post-abortive men and women. So, and I think that's just so powerful, because as we know, nothing really kind of captures the heart and folks' attention than when you're talking to someone about your personal life and your story. So can you share with everyone what Silent No More does and kind of how you got involved before we get into all the stats and facts?
Yeah, it really, Silent No More is about raising awareness about our stories. When I got involved in the pro-life movement back in 1998, I kept looking around because I'm a woman who had an abortion when I was 16 years old. And I kept looking around and I kept thinking, well, where is our voice? I mean, everybody's talking about us, but nobody's talking to us. Seemed like we were the missing voice. So about 4 years into my work at Anglicans for Life, because that's the parent organization that I work for that co-sponsors the Silent No More Awareness Campaign along with Priests for Life. So got all that out of there. So anyhow, as I started sharing my story in the pro-life community, first I have to say I was really kind of shocked, because having not been involved in the pro-life work prior to stepping into this position, I was really surprised that people that were pro-life would actually even care to hear my story. I assumed, because the way that pro-lifers are, anti-abortionists are portrayed in the media, that nobody, that the pro-aborts were the one that cared about the women, and the pro-lifers were the ones that were shaming them. And what I discovered is that there were a lot of folks in the pro-life movement that had abortions. And so when I would share my testimony, they would give me hugs afterwards, and they'd whisper in my ear, me too. Or, I'm so glad you found healing like I did. And I realized that there were a lot of folks that were experiencing the abortion, and a lot of them who had gone through healing, but they weren't talking about it. And they really didn't have a format, a place to talk about it. And that's why we really felt that, we were back in the early 2000s, breast cancer awareness was very big. AIDS awareness was very big. And I looked around and I said, why aren't we doing abortion aftercare awareness? And so, having gone through that healing program, having understood and connected the dots of where my painful experience with the abortion as a 16-year-old was manifesting itself in my behaviors that I didn't really understand as a 16-year-old or even as a 20-year-old, but now as a 35-year-old, beginning to put the pieces together, I began to understand and recognize that, abortion has really been this sick experiment on women and our well-being, emotional, spiritual, physical, psychological well-being. And that, in all honesty, really ticked me off. I mean, it peed me off. It made me mad that, nobody was really being honest about the nightmares, about the fear of having children and having them somehow harmed by our experience, by the frigidity, or the overcompensation and the promiscuity in trying to feel whole again. Abortion really undermines who we are as women. And I understood that finally. I faced it when I went through my abortion recovery program. And once I started putting the pieces together, I had to be a voice because I was angry at how they had exploited our fears of motherhood, our pain, and they weren't offering us help. The pro-lifers were the ones that were saying, yeah, we're here, welcome, and tell us your story. It was the pro-aborts who ended up saying, your story doesn't matter. They undermined us. They basically said, you can have another baby. It's no big deal. They basically said, you're not important if you don't agree that abortion is wonderful. And that's when, when you tick a woman off, she becomes an advocate. And that's what happened to me. I became an advocate for life. And that's how we started the Silent No More awareness campaign.
That's amazing. And it's so great because you were probably one of the first pro-life leaders that I've ever met. You and Father Frank. I was at a National Right to Life convention. I think it was, oh my gosh, it was in the early 2000s at some point. I just gotten started. And so, and you're local to me because I grew up in Northern West Virginia. You're in Pittsburgh. And so I actually heard you speak many, many times when I was just, a college student, high school student, kind of getting my start. So it's always stuck with me just how important your story is. Because, anyone who's kind of had this debate about abortion knows it's the personal story. It's how many folks have had, and this is what we see, the anger on campuses a lot, right? Of someone who is actually post-abortive, who gets very angry when you're speaking out for life and you're speaking out against abortion because they have a personal story, something that's happened in their lives about abortion. And it's hard. It's triggering for them to talk about abortion. And so I think it's so important what you're doing with Silent No More. And you have all your regional coordinators, scattered throughout the country so folks can reach out to you guys and bring a Silent No More, a spokesperson, male or female, to an event to speak about their tragedy and their story and how they sought healing. So I want to come back to a little bit towards the end of the podcast about how folks can connect more with Silent No More. And then also like how we as pro-life advocates can help our friends and family members when we know someone who's had abortion. Because you're right, when you get involved in the pro-life movement and you go and speak, I know way too much about a lot of people's personal lives. Like I'm not an oversharer, but a lot of people are. And so as soon as you kind of speak out against abortion, if I'm speaking at county, like Right to Life dinner or pregnancy center, people come up and will share everything about their personal testimony. And there's so many women who come up and you know they haven't told anybody. And they'll say, "You're the first person I've ever told, but I had an abortion in 1985 or 1976." But yet they're sitting there, they're donating to the pregnancy center, they're active in the pro-life movement, but they still feel like they don't have a voice or that they can't speak out. So thank you for being courageous and leading so many women and men to be courageous. I actually, when I was preparing for this podcast, I was getting kind of all my stats lined up. I found a quote. And I don't know if you ever heard it. It's from Dr. Julius Vogel. He's a psychiatrist and was an abortionist. And it's an article from the 1980s. So it's in the Wanderer magazine, April 13th, 1999. And this was the quote he had. "I've had patients who've had an abortion a year or two ago, women who did the best thing at the time for themselves, but it still bothers them. Many come in, some are just mute, some are hostile. Some burst out crying. There's no question in my mind that they are disturbing a life process. The trauma may sink into the unconscious and never surface in the woman's lifetime, but a psychological price is paid. It may be the alienation, it may be pushing away from human warmth, perhaps a hardening of the maternal instinct. Something happens on the deeper levels of a woman's consciousness when she destroys a pregnancy. I know this as a psychiatrist."
And we know it as we minister to so many women. We see it manifested. One of our regional coordinators is also a hospice nurse. And because Jody is very vivacious and yet very sweet-spirited, she often will call me and she'll say, "I got another deathbed confession today, Georgette." And it's, there's women that are, elderly that are in their 80s and their 90s, and they've held on to this and kept this secret. And now they're dying. And because of Jody's own experience with abortion and her soft-spoken nature, she'll, often invite her patients to share the burdens that are on their heart as they're, preparing to die. And abortion is such a common story at that point. And it grieves me because we haven't gotten the message out there enough. And so I welcome opportunities like this, because not only do I need to get the message out, but I need your listeners to get the message out. Because what happens is when somebody's living with the trauma of an abortion, the trauma of any kind, it's manifesting itself in their behavior, in their emotional ability to connect or disconnect, or not connect, I should say. And so, we're really not doing ourselves any favors with our relationships when we don't share these things, because there is help and there is connection, and there's a lot less judgment and shame attached to abortion, because we are talking about it now so much more. But we have to help people understand their feelings are valid. We need to validate their grief, their loss, because that's really what oftentimes it takes us a number of years. It takes us having children that we finally recognize what we lost in that abortion. I could say I had an abortion, but I could never allow myself to acknowledge what I aborted. It was only when I finally faced that I aborted, I killed a child, my child, and quickly did the math and realized that child would be 19 years old, that my walls of denial came down and my tears started flowing. And I'll be honest with you, I remember standing in my basement crying, thinking about this and thinking, I don't have the right to cry. I made this decision. I'm stuck living in this pain. This is my punishment. This is what I have to live with. And if it wasn't for the fact that a girl that I knew, a friend that I knew, had mentioned a couple of months earlier that she had had an abortion and she had gone through some healing program that I frankly told her she didn't really need, and it was no big deal, get over it. she came back to my mind as I'm standing there in the basement crying. And I called her and I said, Dana, I killed my baby. I had an abortion. And I just kind of started crying and spewing out words. And she was at my door before I even realized she had hung up. And she just held me and she said, Georgette, it's okay to cry. Giving me permission to weep was so powerful. I can still feel that relief in my spirit as I was told that it was okay to grieve for what I had lost, because I had never been given permission to do that. I had never allowed myself to do that.
And I think that's so, would you hear the rhetoric too of the other side, when you'll say, oh, well, some women, they had pre-existing mental health conditions. That's why they're having issues. And so it almost makes it that if I've had any misgivings about the abortion I decided to have, that there's something innately wrong with me. It wasn't wrong the fact that I chose to abort or I, went into a Planned Parenthood. It was wrong. Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So how do you help? So going in, there's so many mental health kind of and emotional things that goes in with abortion. And how do you help someone that who's had an abortion, who maybe hasn't gotten to that point yet, that hasn't allowed themselves to weep?
Well, I think there's two things, and it really depends on the circumstances. But I always say this: start with just inviting them to share their story, because it's kind of like, I don't know, if you've had a miscarriage or if you've even had somebody die that's really important to you, you get about 2 or 3 weeks where people will say, geez, I'm so sorry for you, or they'll bring meals, or they'll, send cards. But after about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, everybody expects you to, buck up, get over it, and move on. And yet, what we really need to do is process out loud. We need to talk about it. So just to say to them, tell me about it. What was it like for you? Tell me, anything you remember. And let them start to articulate what they recall. That in and of itself speaks empathy, that speaks honesty, that must have been a really hard thing to go through. Did you feel alone? And I think this is especially critical now because we're dealing with so many women that are using RU486. Yeah. And they're really self-aborting in essence. And they're home alone, bleeding, passing that baby via a blood clot looking kind of thing. So there's a personal processing. So to give somebody the permission, I'm sorry, my nose is, to give somebody permission to be able to chat that through, talk that through, almost what I find when I ask that question is all of a sudden they start verbalizing out loud, but they're internally living it, processing it. And so you don't have to say a lot. You just have to be a good listener. And then to be able to kind of just affirm that was a really tough decision and what led to that decision even, or did you feel alone? Did you feel supported? A lot of times we feel great relief afterwards. I felt relieved. If somebody would have said, describe how you feel after your abortion for the first 19 years, I would have said relieved, because it was a sense of relief. My problem was gone.
And that's exactly what the abortion industry says, and all of their, after abortion, just to rebut any Silent No More awareness campaign efforts, which we know they've been doing because you all have been so effective. They have done exactly that. They said, oh, everyone who comes in for an abortion has said she felt relief after the abortion.
Well, I do know that there are a lot of us that immediately go home, and a lot of the women's stories, and that's why we actually ask the women to tell in their testimony, how did you feel immediately afterwards? And then what were the long-term implications or feelings? For me, I can say for 19 years, I would have said relief. I was, glad it was over. I didn't want to be pregnant, didn't want anybody to know I was sexually active and all of that. But that moment when I was no longer relieved was just as important as those days that I was relieved. And so I always say to folks, you know what? If you're relieved right now and you're feeling fine about your decision, I'm not here to make you feel guilty. That's not my goal or anything. I'm not into dumping shame on anybody. But if you ever get to the place where the feelings go beyond relief and maybe grief sets in, or sadness, or you need to talk about it, we're still here for you. We're not going to judge you because you didn't feel bad immediately. This is everybody's individual experience. You are entitled to feel however you want, but whenever you get to a place where you need help, you need to know you're not alone. You're not the only person feeling this way. I remember thinking, nobody else seems to be talking about this. I must be the only person. Like, there's something wrong with me. There really wasn't. I was actually normal. I was just internalizing it all because nobody was giving me permission to talk about it. So invite people to talk about it. Invite them to share. Ask questions, and then let it go. You could always do follow-ups, like additional follow-up questions that oftentimes really can take you to the next level of conversation. Is, did you feel it was a boy or a girl? Did you have any sense of connection? Did you ever name the baby? Those are the kind of things that come up. The other thing that you can do is ask them when they were due. My due date was April 24th. I know that date by heart. April 24th was just the other day. It was a couple of weeks ago, and I woke up and I knew it was April 24th. Those dates tend to be embedded in our mind. I have one dear friend who, April 24th, I always get a card in my door. She just knows it's an important thing. So, if they're not grieving it, if they're not upset, if you know the date, just pray for them that day. Just ask the Lord to comfort them. They might not realize why they're itchy or cranky or, just off. They might not be trying to connect it, but somewhere along the line, if they do, you can just say, yeah, I remember that date and I've been praying for you. Those kind of words of affirmation that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, that's where you become that safe person for them to come to say, all right, I'm ready for some healing. I'm ready to take it to the next level. And what we really want to do is we really want to promote the healing programs. We call them healing programs, aftercare programs, recovery programs. We've really tried to, there's a plethora now of organizations and ministries out there. We have set up the Abortion Recovery Coalition, and there's about 40 different groups affiliated with us right now, and we're still just getting started. But one of the things that we're trying to do is to rethink our language. We don't refer to the programs as post-abortion programs. We don't use post-abortive women. We say folks who have had an abortion, women who have lost a child to an abortion, a man who's lost a child to an abortion. If you stop and think about it, you don't say on post-tonsillectomy. And abortive isn't actually even a word. And I mean, none of us like labels. So to say that I'm a post-abortive woman, I don't like a label like that. It just doesn't feel right. I'm a woman who had an abortion. So rethinking how we talk about it, the language we use, reminding people that, ironically, stigma is, to me, one of the most interesting concepts that the pro-aborts like to try to continually thrust on us, that somehow or another, we're the reason that people feel stigma. And if we could just make abortion, if
we would just shut up, no woman would ever feel bad about abortion ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just healthcare. I mean, if only that worked, we wouldn't need 40 plus abortion recovery programs. But the reality is that the stigma isn't something you can erase. It's an internal, unresolved experience. It's more of an internal. You can't erase. I keep thinking Stigma isn't something we erase. Stigma is something that we have to address and heal. If you feel stigma, let's talk about why you're feeling that. There's something behind it. And it's not simply, guilt from the pro-lifers. It's a internal experience more than an external experience.
Wow. That's yeah, that's right on. And we hear this all the time on campuses of you're shaming women. Your entire movement has been set up to shame women, which is such a, it's like you must have never met any of us, or so many of us in the pro-life movement have had a personal experience with abortion. That's why we choose to do this work, because we don't want other women, other men, other families suffering the trauma and the loss of abortion. So I thank you for sharing that. I think that's very helpful. And actually, thanks for the new kind of language. So stop saying post-abortive women, saying women who had abortion. You're right. It's very true though. People hate labels, right? Yeah. People don't even like labels pro-life, pro-choice.
It's a different number of words. I understand, internally, like, shorthand, I tend to, just use PAS. But I'm very conscientious of the fact that if we want to influence the culture, we have to be very careful about our language. And, and I guess for me, when I first started this work and I was reading all these books on post-abortion and I kept reading this phrase post-abortive, and I kept waiting for somebody to tell me what is that and who is that, because they kept referring to it. and I kept thinking, I don't know what this is. And then after I figured it out and I got it, I thought to myself, am I the only person in this entire world that doesn't connect these words? And then I started realizing, no, most people don't. We don't say we're post, heart trauma or heart. My husband had an open heart surgery. He wasn't post open heart surgery. He had a heart attack and had bypass surgery. So change the language.
That's really powerful though, because you're right. Because it's if someone's not, we use language internally in the movement that no one else uses, and then you're trying to go out and communicate to the rest of the world. They're like, what are you talking about? Even that label of pro-life, pro-choice is confusing for especially students who are like, I don't know which one is that. And they know it's about abortion, but they're not entirely sure which one is which is to me, I'm like, how can you not know? But they don't know. They don't do this every day. They're not following the pro-life news and the pro-life social media channels. So when we go over like the risks of, the emotional risks of abortion, I just want to kind of go through some of the studies that we found. Americans United for Life did in 2019. It kind of did like a summary of known health risks. And it was great because everything was cited, all academic journals, not pro-life sources. They found that there were over 100 studies that demonstrated the connection between abortion and subsequent mental health problems. One study they linked to said there was a 65% more likely score for a woman to score in the high risk range for clinical depression than those women their first pregnancies resulted in birth. They found they have multiple studies that found at least a 10% that 10% of women who are suffering mental health problems attributed them directly to having an abortion. There's the suicide risk. So they found one of the leading studies, which was led by a pro-abortion researcher, found 27% of women who aborted reported experiencing suicidal ideation, with as many as 50% of minors experiencing suicide or suicidal ideation. The risk for suicide was 3 times higher for women who aborted than for women who delivered. Another study found 42% of women who aborted reported major depression by age 25, and 39% of, here's that term, post-abortive women who had an abortion, suffered from anxiety disorders by the age of 25. There was also multiple studies that linked abortion to sleeping disorders eating disorders. And I found one, it was interesting on CareNet. CareNet, they're a chain of pregnancy resource centers across the country. So pro-life pregnancy resource centers, they commissioned their own study in 2012 and 2013 with Dr. Priscilla Coleman. If you do any kind of WebMD like searches on abortion and the aftermath of abortion, you'll see a lot of studies from Priscilla Coleman. And so this study was 987 participants. It was a qualitative study. So it was done within the CareNet centers. They had asked women to identify if they had had an abortion in their history and how that abortion affected them. So it wasn't a statistical study because it was women who CareNet knew had gone through an abortion. But it was interesting. In her study, she found 13% of the respondents had said they visited a mental health professional before the first pregnancy and abortion, compared with 67% who said they made visits after. 6.6% said they used prescription drugs for psychological health before abortion experience, compared with 51% after. 49% said they lacked the desire to keep on living at some point after the abortion. And so, it just goes on and on. And I think, we hear these studies. And I'll cite them, on campuses, but often I hear that, well, you're the reason why, if these studies are true, you're the reason why women want to have, commit suicide, think about suicide because of the pro-life movement. If you all would just shut up and let women lead their lives, there wouldn't be, any woman, there wouldn't be this issue or this risk, which we know it's just not true. Because even the studies that I was looking up on PubMed, which is a government database of all like the academic journals and healthcare, most of the studies I find and what I like to say on campuses are I try to use non-American studies. So I'll look at Swedish. There was a Finnish. There was a Denmark study came out in Denmark a couple of years ago on suicide, but I try to go places where abortion really isn't seen as that controversial. There's not as active of a pro-life movement or a pro-life vocal voice. And even those studies, they reveal the exact same thing, that the risk for suicide, the risk for a woman dying within 10 to 20 years, there's an increased risk, I think, within 10 years after your abortion versus women who didn't choose to have an abortion. So there are a lot of studies out there. And when you're kind of just having this discussion about how abortion harms women, link the studies, talk about the studies, but also talk about the stories. Because I think that's the number one thing is the stories of how it personally affected your friend, how abortion affected you or affected your family members. What about, Georgette, what about physical health? So, we obviously know, I think anyone who's kind of just being somewhat honest knows that abortion will affect a woman, psychologically. But what about physical health? What have you found kind of doing this work with Silent No More? Because you're in touch with thousands of women who've had an abortion. What are some of the biggest kind of physical risks that you've seen?
Well, let me just quickly go back to the emotional fallout. On our website, silentnomore.com, we have a specific page for the testimonies, and there's over 6,000, there's over 2,900 online stories, and 600 of them are on video. And if you go to abortiontestimony.com, that's like a shortcut to this page. Mm-hmm. What's cool about this page is it's got almost keywords that you can click to search for stories that are related to anything from RU486, rape, depression, nightmares. So we, in essence, tag the testimonies mm-hmm. with information, with certain keywords that then we use our own search engine, that people can use our search engine to identify and read these stories. These stories, we hear the emotional fallout, but the ones that really irritate me again and it just make me mad is the fact that there's the physical problems, because nobody's acknowledging the fact that a lot of the physical problems are actually being caused by the abortion doctors really being inept and not caring. Mm-hmm. So we see infertility as a huge issue. That they really struggle to conceive, because of the scarring, the scar tissue in the uterine wall becomes a problem for any future pregnancies to attach to that wall and adhere and implant, I guess is the proper word. So you have future pregnancies become a problem to actually conceive. So fertility is an issue. We see an incompetent cervix where, again, the doctor nicks the cervix. So at a certain point in the pregnancy, the weight of the uterus, the baby in the uterus, in the womb, starts, in essence, stretching it too early. And they deliver early. We have preterm delivery. We have...
Which preterm delivery, that's like very common. Because that's like one of the first things they ask you when you go to an OBGYN is how many abortions, how many miscarriages, how many live births, and how are you going to pay for it, right? And that abortion question is because there is no one denies that there is a statistical, link between your abortion, when you had your abortion, how late you had your abortion, and your risk for preterm birth.
Exactly. And it was interesting. I got into a doula, not a doula. What's the midwives, the women that actually, go into the centers and help deliver babies naturally instead of at the hospital. I had a midwife contact me, and she wanted to do research in our testimonies, and reach into talking with the different women, have access to them. And her question was related to how your birth experience went because of your abortion experience. And were there places where even the giving birth, the delivery process, became completely different? She saw it kind of here and there, and so she started doing some more research to see if whether or not it was kind of anecdotal or if there was a connection. Women who struggled through deliveries, physical pain increase, or just really having a hard time going through the process, there was a connection to their abortion experience because it had, in essence, changed their mental processing of what was going on, because there was a connection to a dead baby at the end. So, these are the places that nobody's talking about. We know that there's a lot of issues with infection. A lot of clinics are reported because their instruments are not cleaned on a regular basis, are not sanitized between patients. And so infection is introduced. Infection, pelvic inflammatory disease, leads to fertility problems also. So, when you start looking at the women that are dealing with fertility issues, dealing with the increased risk of breast cancer, and what's really hard to me is that if you've got a woman that's going through fertility problems or breast cancer, or has delivered a baby early that is now in the NICU unit, there's a lot of trauma and pain going on in her anyhow. And when we start connecting the dots or asking questions about when the abortion was in relationship to, now you have breast cancer and it's been 6 years, and, that adds to the pain level. And I will be honest with you, I really struggle with that because I don't want to add to somebody's pain, but I do want them to understand how this decision that we made when we were 16, 17, 18, 20, 23 years old, thinking it was going to be an isolated experience and it was just going to be over there and nobody would know and I could get on with my life, is now impacting me at age 30. And it's creating health crisis for myself or for my new unborn baby. That lends a great deal of pain. And again, it's that place where it throws off the natural bonding. It throws off the natural love because now you're loving with guilt. You're loving with this pain connection.
Yeah.
So we really have to be very gentle when we're talking with people on the physical side of it.
Sure.
The emotional side is almost a little easier to wade into. It's a little safer place to be.
That's true. And it's true. I don't think if you're talking to a friend who's post-abortive or had an abortion in the past, I don't really think you want to lead off with the physical. Like, hey, so have you had any of these side effects that you should know about? Have you been getting your mammograms? Because, I mean, that is really not, I don't think, a conversation for you to be having. But I have sadly witnessed that. I would say, though, from the guilt perspective, I think, I have 2 children with cystic fibrosis. And so when we found out that Gunnar had CF, my oldest, that was hard, because as it's a genetic disease, meaning I'm a recessive carrier for CF, and so is my husband. And we have that guilt, and we still deal with that guilt, that we're the reason our children have cystic fibrosis. And that, we would take that away from them any moment we could, but we can't.
That's a very similar experience, and something that you would be able to have empathy for a woman that is now dealing with a baby, an early delivery that maybe is having some complications. You would be able to really connect with that person over that similar experience. And those are those places where when we make those connections, human beings are relational. Then we can set the defense mechanisms down, and we can really connect.
That's right.
Because it isn't about you believe this and I believe that. It's about we want people to be healthy and to live into what they were created to be. That's really our goal.
And that's really why it's like that. We always talk about our method on campuses is belong, believe, behave. You have to have that relation with that other person.
I like that. We'll have to borrow that one.
Yeah. Online, we have found it's actually believe, belong, behave. But in person, it's belong, believe, behave. And so it's like until you have that connection with that other person, that relationship, you can use the stats and figures, but you're not really going to get to the root of the issue. And it's only when you develop that relationship when that person's going to feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you about their abortion.
One of the other places where we see this manifested, especially with young folks, is and when they're dealing with a parent who's had an abortion. That's probably been some of my most memorable. And again, I'm sorry, I'm a weepy person anyway, but, I can tell you so many stories of the young women and men that would come up to me and say, my mom had an abortion and I've seen how it's impacted her life. What can I say to her? And again, it's that same thing. Tell me the story. What got you there? Tell me how you feel now. There's funny points and as kids become adults where the parent-child relationship gets equalized, and when you're a young adult and your parent maybe is finally for the first time or along the way told you, but now it's time to bring it up and have another conversation about it. That again is where we connect, and that is another opportunity for that student to say to the parent,
So, Georgette, can you tell me about the child? So the child who finds out their mom had an abortion, the young person, whether they're in high school or college, or maybe they're an adult child. How does that person start that conversation with their mom?
Well, typically the mom will have told them somewhere along the line so that they have that knowledge. And they're processing it. Now, some kids will actually know that there was supposed to be a sibling. There's almost like a missing person in the family. But this is really where I get some of the most heartfelt comments are students coming up to me and saying, my mom had an abortion. My dad was involved in an abortion. How do I talk to them? And really it is to, again, offer to listen to their story, help them understand that you're not judging them. And then even go so far as to say, I would be happy to attend an abortion aftercare program with you. Because the biggest component about the aftercare programs is the opportunity, the invitation to grieve, acknowledge this child is missing from your life, and that you grieve it, that you miss this baby, this, now there's a 20-year-old. or, however old the child would be. And so allowing family members to come in and participate is very common in the aftercare programs. And that, in essence, allows us to welcome that aborted baby back into the family and normalize the experience. Families will put memorials up. There's unbornmemorials.com that you can go to. You can visit different sites and put the baby's name in, naming the baby. All of those things normalizes the grief. It doesn't normalize the abortion. It normalizes the grief and affirms that that child was a member of that family and was important to those people involved. And that will actually bring the family together. It can really be a great opportunity for reconciliation. And oftentimes couples that have stayed together after an abortion and now they have additional kids, there's almost a healing that takes place in the entire family. The whole marriage and family relationship is restored because they've all been living with a secret. So the one thing we all learn from doing this work is that secrets are really dangerous. And so if you're a woman who's had an abortion and you're thinking, well, how do I tell my children? I would say get in touch with me. We have this really great 20-page little teaching thing about when and how to tell your children. We talk about how I told my daughter when she was 8 and that sort of thing. But it really is important that we do tell our kids of our experiences because then they can become lessons for them. We don't say, don't have sex for no reason. We say it because we've lived the consequences of making that choice. So parents in general, we have to share our not so great backgrounds because they really can be a blessing and a lesson for our children.
How does, we need to do a whole episode on how to talk to your kids about your abortion. How does someone get in touch with you to get that kind of 20-page kit?
You can do just mail at silentnomore.com. That comes to my office. So mail at silentnomore.com. And we call it the telling others. Okay. Sometimes it's telling the spouse or telling your parents. I had to tell my parents. I was 35 years old when I finally told them the truth. It was really hard. It was, but I'm really glad I did. So, we have to do a whole show on that because I think that's a common question that a lot of folks have is how do I tell my story? But you're right. It's so powerful because having that courage to tell your story to your children, I mean, it's going to affect them their whole lives. And every time they hear someone kind of on that college campus talking about abortion being this great choice, they're gonna think about their missing sibling, how it affected their parents. How do you? It helps them save their friends from going through it, or themselves. I mean, I can't tell you how many women, the favorite part of their testimony is the fact that they told their kids, and their kids made different decisions than we did, because they knew the reality of what their mother and father had gone through.
No, that's why secrets are bad. Secrets kill. Absolutely. How do you, you mentioned earlier on Silent No More's website, you have all these video testimonies, 600 video testimonies, all the written testimonies. I'm sure sexual assault comes up because this is something we hear often in the pro-life movement of, okay, well, I'm with you. I think abortion's wrong, but not in cases of rape, not in cases of sexual assault, because surely why would you want to traumatize another woman, Kristen, by forcing her to deliver her rapist baby? So how do you kind of respond to that, knowing what you know and the women you've met who were victims of sexual assault and then became pregnant?
Well, what they say, women who were raped or assaulted will tell you that the abortion was like a second rape. Mm-hmm. It was like being traumatized all over again. It was a second assault. Because everybody's saying the abortion is going to fix everything and it's, going to reset you. It's going to make that whole thing less painful. Mm. But you have to appreciate what an abortion is. You're putting a vacuum cleaner into your body and it's an assault. It's a trauma. And it feels a lot like the rape. It kind of triggers a lot of that sense of lost control and somebody is coming at you. So And there's been actually a really good book written called Victims and Victors. And they did a ton of research with, I think it was over 300 women that had become pregnant through their rape. And they looked at the women that kept the babies, the women that aborted the babies, and then the women that placed those babies for adoption with an adoptive family. And the women that felt the best down the road and had the best long-term response, if you will, were the women who placed their children with an adoptive family. In essence, they were able to redeem the assault. They allowed something good to come out of it. They weren't parenting the child, so they weren't constantly being reminded of it. They endured the 9 months of pregnancy, and they had the support of people around them. I'll be honest with you, Kristen, I really think that people want women to abort when they become pregnant through rape because they don't want to be reminded that they failed that woman to keep her safe. I think it's a very selfish encouragement. It's like if you just have an abortion, we'll erase what happened to you. Oh no, that will never be erased. And if you think that you're doing somebody a favor by suggesting that, it's a very selfish favor.
Oh, wow. What about RU486? So you mentioned this earlier in the show, talking about when we were talking about the emotional trauma of abortion. This is something we're dealing with now. 40% of abortions are being committed from chemical abortions. They're pushing this on college campuses. They've used and they're trying to use the COVID crisis to, loosen all the federal regulations on chemical abortion. So a doctor doesn't even have to see a woman. He can just prescribe and mail her the pill. And then there you go. It's super simple. She just takes these pills and has an abortion and no one knows. But what about the emotional? We've seen some really sad stories on campuses where girls have come up, started screaming at us, yelling at us. We sat down with her, started talking to her. And then as we, start building this relationship, she'll bring up pictures on her phone of the baby she aborted at home. And so, and she took, looked through the blood clots, found the pieces of her child, took pictures and kept those pictures on her phone. And so I think about what's the change, I guess, in how we help in the healing process, because it's not like a surgical abortion 30 years ago where you go in, they put you under, you wake up, you're no longer a mother, and you're just sitting in recovery room, your child's dead. This is an active process where you're taking the pill, you're told to sit on the toilet, don't look, keep flushing, and we know she's looking.
First of all, you have to appreciate that space that she's doing all this in, the bathroom, the bedroom, that now becomes the abortion clinic, if you will. So this is kind of a weird thing, but about 10 years ago, I was walking up my stairs, going upstairs to the bedrooms, and I heard my daughter say something that really shocked me. I was very surprised by what she said. She was speaking to a friend, and I shouldn't have overheard it. We obviously have talked about it and all that, but I still to this day can't walk up those stairs without thinking about what she said and hearing her voice. And every time I do that, I did it this morning again, carrying my coffee cup upstairs. But now what happens is I think, if this triggers me, what is it doing to the women with RU486? And I finish walking up the stairs praying for them, because our culture, in this endeavor to empower women and exploit them, because you got to know these pills are expensive, they charge a lot of money, and they're the cheapest form of abortion for the abortion industry.
They are.
I mean, there is no responsibility, hands off, they don't have to get their hands dirty at all. And this is exploitation to a whole nother level, because these women, this whole thing is happening in their bedroom, their bathroom, by themselves. They're taking pictures, they're reliving it, and they don't have any tools to address it. And I'll be honest with you, we're just building those tools, and we're not sure we've even found the right ones. But the key point is that it's a trauma and that we need to let that trauma be addressed. Now, here's the problem we have. You don't typically feel safe enough to address your abortion experience until you're in a place emotionally, oftentimes physically and spiritually, that you can, in essence, dive into all of the feelings associated with it. Mm-hmm. So what we sense is happening is that people are numbing themselves. They might be using some sort of substance to help, or they've developed skills to just shut down emotionally. Mm. And so you'll see somebody, you'll talk to them, they'll engage you, but they're not even able to articulate their emotions about it because they've had to shut them down in order to survive it. Mm-hmm. The cell phone photographs give them a sense of, it's almost like they relive it, trying to come up with a different outcome. It's a very similar kind of thing that you do when you're reenacting a trauma because you're looking for a different outcome from it. Mm-hmm. You know, you're trying to come around it from a different side. That's why oftentimes a girl will get pregnant again right after her abortion. Mm-hmm. Okay. She's looking for a different outcome. She's trying again. She wants to rewrite history. And those are those places where we need to come alongside those girls and just love them. Mm. Just be there with them. Sit with them. We don't have to try to fix them right now because we have to help them just find that safe space where they're going to be at a place where they can unpack those emotions. But they just need to know that there's going to be some places and some people that are going to love on them in the midst of it. Well, again, triggering anniversary dates, triggering words, those things are going to be where they need that friend to sit with them and cry with them.
Wow. Well, thank you, Georgette, for all this information. I took like a whole page of notes here, and I do this for a living. So if I took a whole page of notes, I can imagine you might have to listen to this episode a couple of times. But where I've got some like links. I know I'm going to put up Americans Unite for Life has this, like I mentioned earlier, has this great summary of all the known health risks with the scientific studies, peer-reviewed journals, not pro-life sources. I'm going to have that put up. It's on our website, Students for Life. It'll be studentsforlife.org/abortion risks. I'm just going to beg, borrow, steal from AUL's report and stick it up there. I'm sure they won't mind.
They love it.
Yeah. But where else can folks go? Like, where can we go if we know someone who's had an abortion, who's struggling, and we want to get, maybe get some information into their hands about healing retreats or the healing process?
We've got, what we've done is we've created URLs to make it easier to get to specific places on our website. So for instance, the abortiontestimony.com takes you to the testimony pages, so you can search them out.
And those are great if you're in a Right to Life group or a Students for Life group. You can show those videos at your group meetings.
Yeah, you can. I mean, we show people how to use them on their phone if they're doing sidewalk counseling right at, right on the sidewalk. So if they don't have an abortion testimony, yay, you don't have one. Well, you've got ours right on your phone. Okay. Abortionforgiveness.com takes you to a search engine where you put your zip code in and you can find abortion aftercare programs.
Okay.
And then abortionshockwaves.com is our page and information where we address the father more in depth, grandparents, siblings, pro-lifers in general, abortion clinic workers. And then one thing we want to also do is, if you've got somebody on your campus or a friend that's thinking about having an abortion, I wrote this brochure called What's So Bad About Abortion? And in it, we list 10 ways that we see abortion as harmful to women. And I wrote it because the pro-aborts had actually done a seminar in New York called What's So Bad About Abortion? And I thought that really is a good title. But my answers are completely different than yours because I know why it's so bad. So our brochure is available through Heritage House. You can look that up. So the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, we have great people. Our regional coordinators are always available to help folks. So we're here for you.
And your folks, your regional coordinators will come out to a Students for Life group meeting. What we've done before where we knew if a abortion victim imagery display was coming to a campus and the Students for Life group was saying, "Hi, how do we respond to this?" We say, bring a Silent No More trained person to hold a sign, say, "I regret my abortion, asking why," and start that conversation. A 40 Days for Life rally event. Bring in a Silent No More speaker. Your parish, when you're doing Respect Life Month, bring in a Silent No More speaker. I can think of no better person to kind of have to come to tell their story and make that case to your church, your school, wherever, why abortion's wrong, and have someone who's lived it and endured it. So thank you, Georgette, for coming on today to Explicitly Pro-Life. I really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you guys.
You gave us a lot of, things to think about, some tips, ways to go about our mission. So I really appreciate you. Even helped me out a little bit, and I'm going to try to change some of my language. So thank you for all that you do at Silent No More Awareness. And thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You share this podcast with pro-life friends, family members, peers. Make sure you spread this message. This is often something we don't talk enough about, I feel like, in the pro-life movement, about how do we help those who've suffered an abortion, who've undergone an abortion, and where can they go and get the hope and the healing they deserve, and how you can help be a facilitator of that. So make sure you spread this message around and continue to talk about how we in the pro-life movement love everyone. And we are here to serve women and children, and we're still there. Even when she has the abortion, we are still there for her, and we want to help her get the healing that she deserves. So thank you all for tuning in this week. Thanks, Georgette. That was great.